Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to do a midweek update based on what we've seen in the world of cannabis. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes to learn about the evolution of the industry over time, identify top companies, and then take advantage whenever you're ready. But this is a great report from Leafly highlighting that so far already Americans are on pace to spend twice as much on cannabis as they have on milk. So, get this, Americans spent more than $12 billion on legal cannabis products in the first 6 months of 2021. So this is the most up-to-date data report we have, according to data analyzed by Leafly and Whitney Economics. That's nearly as much as Americans spent on milk in all of 2020. According to the Dairy Farmers of America, consumers spent roughly $12.6 billion on milk last year. Cannabis sales topped $18 billion in 2020, and the 6-month trend in 2021 puts the industry on pace to reach $25 billion to $26 billion in sales by the end of this year, 2021. That would represent a year-over-year increase of roughly 35%. Now, that growth would continue the cannabis industry's position as the nation's fastest growing industry. In 2020, sales revenue increased roughly 60% over 2019, driven by increased buying during the pandemic, where a lot of industries saw less buying, cannabis saw more. So, as we can see, the trajectory is increasing. Obviously, with increasing these projections makes the numbers more attractive, but some mid-year highlights so far. So what we know, mid-year revenues are approaching $12.5 billion, medical and adult use combined, after first quarter revenues were $5.8 to $5.9 billion. With second quarter revenues forecasted to be in the range of $6.2 to $6.5 billion, the U.S. legal cannabis market is gaining momentum for a strong back half of the year, and as we've seen, typically most spending is done as we lead up towards the holidays. Based on the latest sales data, Whitney Economics increased its 2021 forecast to $22.2 billion to $25 billion and increased its 25 forecast to $44.9 billion. So Whitney Economics is bullish on the industry, as I am, based on the data that they've collected, which is great to show that more Americans are, again, just voting with their dollars and spending on cannabis. Now on to the legislative side. This is a great post on Reddit, Understanding Washington, the Draft Bill and Next Steps, written by someone who has experience in politics. So I'm not going to get too much into this. The link will be below. I recommend you read this if you have any investments in the industry. This is a very good and informative little snippet to help simplify the legislative process so that you can understand how complicated it is, but also at the same time why it takes time to get these moving parts all cohesively together, on the same page to actually get some stuff done. But regardless, we're going to go down to the conclusion. So there is a lot in here, but it's very informative, especially if you're a cannabis investor. But just to highlight, the legislative landscape is identical to what we saw in February, except we now have the Senate banking bill introduced, 2 multiple House bills introduced, including a GOP-led bill, 3 a House-passed bill, 4th session in a row now, and 4 a Senate draft bill with comprehensive language in it. And we have all this on top of the states that legalized in the 2020 election that are in the process of bringing their markets online, and we've got the states in 2021 that have legalized, like New York, Connecticut, New Mexico, and Virginia, that are also in progress of bringing their markets online. So cannabis has moved from a non-starter with McConnell to a priority of the Senate Majority Leader. Meanwhile, the industry is too big to ignore from a regulatory standpoint. There are too many court cases, issues of public safety, and dollars untaxed for this to remain an unlegislated area, which is 100% true. There may be a short period of relative quiet from the legislative side. However, if we see or hear of progress after August recess, that confirms it is a priority and a live bill. By then, the MSOs will have posted another set of quarterly earnings, providing alternative potential catalysts. The road is a bit murkier now, and the potential to be surprised by moving Washington slightly higher. At this point, I hold good luck to all, as this person who happens to be in the know is also long several Tier 1 and Tier 2 MSOs. So very informative article. If you have not read it, you can grab that below. Onto the snippet from Todd Harrison. Thank you, Todd. Providing that Roth Capital gets it, this is the same as we've been saying. They don't have the votes. We'll be left with SAFE. Plus, this is a state-led secular growth story. No matter what happens, U.S. cannabis leaders are well-positioned to succeed. State-level social justice programs need functional banking. So this is just another snippet to reiterate from Roth Capital what we're seeing. Bill is positive for industry progress. We believe that CAOA is favorable for the industry and continues to protect the state-by-state moats that many of the U.S. MSOs have built out, which is very important for especially the top-tier MSOs if you already own them. The fact that the bill was introduced is a positive step and likely paves a favorable pathway for iterations to be likely watered down from its current versions. We believe Senator Schumer needs a bill on the cannabis ledger after putting so much emphasis on it, and the mere fact that New York's robust legalization path requires so many many social equity license holders to operate to generate taxes. In our opinion, safe banking is a bipartisan way to help many of the social equity licenses to obtain capital to run a cannabis business, especially small business entrepreneurs that were impacted by the war on drugs. How are they going to get access to capital if MSOs can't even get access to capital? As a result, we think CAOA discussions compromise will ultimately lead to a cannabis political win with the passage of safe banking that includes DOJ involvement of safe harbor language, effectively allowing banks and funds to serve the industry and lead to U.S. exchange uplisting by U.S. MSOs. Highlighting that U.S. exchange listings and eventual federal legalization are the two most significant catalysts for U.S. cannabis, but even without, we remain bullish on U.S. operators. And it seems like the U.S. exchange listings will be the first big catalyst, and then there's going to be a big gap in between then until federal legalization, and that could be another one. We don't necessarily know, but it's important to play what we have in front of us, which will be safe. That's the nearest term catalyst, on top of these great earnings that we can expect second week of August from the MSOs. But also wanted to highlight that the Surgeon General says it's time to stop locking people up for cannabis. This is big to hear from the top doctor in the country, so we're just going to play this clip from him.
Dr. Murthy, before I let you go, quickly on a different topic, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer introduced legislation this week to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. From a health perspective, do you support that?
Bit of a gap.
Well, when it comes to marijuana, Dan, I think we have to let science guide us, and we know that the science tells us that there are some benefits for marijuana from a medical perspective, but there are also some harms that we have to consider, and we have to put those together as we think about the right policy. Now, when it comes to decriminalization, I don't think that there is value to individuals or to society to lock people up for marijuana use. I don't think that serves anybody well. But I do think that in terms of our approach to marijuana, I worry when we don't let science guide our process and policy making. And in a certain general, that's my role, is to work with policymakers, to work with members in the community and the general public to help people understand what science tells us and where we have gaps to help fill those gaps with research and with honest inquiry.
Dr. Vivek Murthy, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Appreciate it.
And we seem to get more and more evidence and science every day, and if politicians don't want to educate themselves on that science, that's their fault. Then their constituents are just going to replace them, right? But I wanted to highlight a few things here. Previously in 2015, Murthy said that there is preliminary data showing that for certain medical conditions and symptoms, cannabis can be helpful. And there's plenty of that, more and more as we go through time. But in 2018, the doctor said he's concerned about how rapidly states have been legalizing cannabis, because there are a lot of unknowns about its effects. But at the same time, that's why we need to deschedule it so that we can actually research it, right? So it's a powerful statement coming from the top doctor in the U.S., after one of the Supreme Court justices came out with a statement similar to it. It's just the fact that locking people up benefits no one. So it's time to change these laws. And onto that, some more science, as legalizing cannabis could stem opioid abuse. Pitt study suggests, and we've seen many studies that say the same thing since 2014 even. But hey, we'll have a few more if that's what we need. Legalizing cannabis for recreational use could lead to fewer opioid-spurred health emergencies and overdose death, a University of Pittsburgh study has found. Opioid-related emergency department visits dropped by 7.6% within a year of cannabis legalization for adult use residents in 4 states, California, Nevada, Maine, and Massachusetts, according to the analysis led by Pitt's Graduate School of Public Health. Lead study author Coleman Drake said the research does not point to cannabis legalization as the silver bullet to stemming the opioid epidemic, but it could be another arrow in the quivers of policymakers to combat the broader crisis. Yeah, clearly it's going to help, though. The data just says that. It suggests that recreational cannabis legalization could be an effective tool to help not only reduce opioid use, but also to reduce the health implications that stem from opioid use, one of them being overdoses, said Drake, assistant professor in Pitt's Department of Health Policy and Management. That's potentially exciting and promising. Yes, no, it is exciting and promising, and it's something that should be acted on sooner than later. Regardless, though, the study did not examine data from Pennsylvania, where only medical cannabis has been available since 2016, although legislative efforts are brewing to change that. 19 states and the District of Columbia now allow recreational cannabis use, with New York, New Mexico, Virginia, and Connecticut among the latest to do so this year. I would hope that policymakers in states that have not yet legalized recreational cannabis would take a look at this closely, Drake said. I would hope so too, and I hope Americans would hope for the same thing. But this was surprising to find. Republican lawmakers tell Biden to keep cannabis campaign promise by reclassifying it under federal law. And this came yesterday as a pair of congressional Republican lawmakers is urging President Biden to keep his campaign promise and reschedule cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act. Reps Dave Joyce, Republican from Ohio, and Don Young, Republican from Arkansas, both co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, sent the letter to the president on Monday. It states that that modest reform is a matter of public health. It is very true. If we take a look at this tweet and open it up, with overdoses involving opioids causing a record 69,710 deaths in 2020, the U.S. can no longer afford to sideline less addictive pain management alternatives, which is a view that's pretty much unheard of from Republicans. So big ups and respect to Dave Joyce and Dong Young for putting the effort into actually doing this. This is why I wrote to POTUS alongside Rep. Dong Young, urging him to reschedule cannabis as a matter of public health. Now, looking at their bill, that the GOP-led bill that they put in, I believe that they actually want to reschedule cannabis, not deschedule it completely, but then looking at another article, I found that they did want to deschedule it. So I'm not exactly sure, but mind you, I think the most important thing going forward for industry is to completely deschedule it, not reschedule it. Regardless, do we think Biden's going to listen to any Republicans if he won't even listen to his Democrats? Doubtful. But it's just good to see that more leaders in the U.S. that have the power to do so are speaking to the president and trying to get him to do what seems fairly obvious at this point and just provide a safer alternative medicinally to these addictive opioids that are killing people. And on top of that, Missouri cannabis activists file legalization initiatives for 2022 as other groups prepare separate measures. So it's good to see that more states, again, individuals on the ground are taking action, as a group of Missouri cannabis activists recently filed 4 separate initiatives to put cannabis reform on the state's 2022 ballot, a move that comes as other advocacy groups are preparing separate efforts to collect signatures for cannabis ballot petitions of their own. Meanwhile, still other activists are focusing on getting the legislature to pass a resolution to place the question of legalization before voters next year, which should not be so difficult to do. One group, Fair Access Missouri, is exploring multiple citizens' initiatives with the hopes of getting at least one on the ballot next year. 3 of the 4 would create a system of legalized cannabis sales for adults 21 and older, while another would simply amend the state's existing medical cannabis program. So we've seen across the country that smart rules and an open market are the way to go when legalizing cannabis, and that's what we'll be bringing to Missouri, the organization said in a statement last week. While the group is pushing 4 separate measures, there's overlap among their provisions, and it's likely that advocates at the stage are putting out feelers to see which may have the greatest potential to pass if put to a vote. So it's great to see, again, though, just individuals out of Missouri taking this action into their own hands, because that seems to be how this sort of stuff gets done. On to MSO news. Trulieve brings medical cannabis to Crystal River as they announced they've opened a new Florida dispensary, the company's 95th nationwide, and I believe 86th in Florida. So as we can see, Trulieve continues to expand in Florida, where they currently dominate the market share there, so that is giving them their strong grip on that market, while Air Wellness is going shopping. They enter Illinois to agree to acquire Herbal Remedies Dispensaries LLC, and they actually also agreed to acquire Tahoe Hydro. So we're just going to look into some of these details. Has entered into a definitive agreement to acquire Herbal Remedies Dispensaries, an operator of 2 licensed retail dispensaries in Illinois, adding an 8th state to its expanding national footprint. So this does give Air Wellness access to Illinois, but what does this cost them? Air intends to purchase 100% of the membership's interest of Herbal, an operator of 2 licensed dispensaries in Quincy, Illinois, so they're going to be getting a good amount of customers, ideally, this sounds like. The county seat of Adams County, the most western county in Illinois, The terms of the transaction include consideration of $30 million. So they paid $30 million, made $10 million of stock, $12 million of seller notes, and $8 million in cash. Based on current projections, the company estimates it's paying approximately 5x Herbal Remedies 2021 EBITDA, which I imagine they think is a steal, which is why they're paying that. Herbal will add approximately 50 employees to Air's total headcount. So seems like they're getting a solid footprint in Illinois, and if you're willing to pay $30 million now to get, a lot more down the line, seems like a wise investment. What do you think? Let me know. But on to their other purchase from this award-winning cultivator of high-quality flower in Nevada. If we look at the details of this one, Air intends to purchase 100% of the members' interest in Tahoe Hydro. The terms of the transaction include, subject to adjustment, $17 million in total consideration, made up of $5 million in cash, $3.5 million in debt, and approximately $8.5 million in stock. So this one is $17 million, the cost. Based on our current projections, the company estimates it is paying approximately 4.5x Tahoe Hydro NV Green's combined 2021 adjusted EBITDA. The acquisition of Tahoe Hydro and NV Green adds 2 cultivation licenses, 1 production license, and 1 distribution license to Air's Nevada footprint. So as we can see, these purchases in the past have been a lot cheaper. Now they are getting more expensive. As we can see, Air just spent $47 million to increase their footprint. Whether this is good or not really depends. We're going to have to wait and see, but obviously Air is pretty happy with this purchase, or with these purchases, in order to go through with them. On top of that, Curaleaf violated labor law in MA cannabis union case, judge says. So at first glance, this could be a bit troubling, but if we look into the details, it turns out, hey, if you want to learn lessons, you got to make mistakes. And although this, looks like it could be cause for concern, it's really not. As U.S. cannabis multi-state giant Curaleaf engaged in unfair labor practices by implicitly promising certain retail store workers in Massachusetts increased benefits and better employment conditions if they didn't support unionization, the labor court judge ruled. Interesting. Well, the 25-page decision last week by National Labor Relations Board's administrative law judge Ira Sandrin in Washington, D.C. is a cautionary tale for cannabis businesses in terms of how they communicate with employees when unionizing activities are underway. Now, this is important in any other industry. You're also going to have to be aware of this and use your language carefully. And, it's just a matter of this new industry coming out and companies trying things, or maybe someone working with the company in the past saying something that wasn't necessarily true. Yes, that can become an issue if not dealt with responsibly. However, the judge dismissed several other allegations against Massachusetts-based Curaleaf, including a claim that the company unlawfully terminated an employee because of her pro-union views. So whatever that person was claiming, the judge dismissed these allegations, so it seems like clearly it wasn't enough of an issue. But just want to highlight that Sandrin's order calls for Curaleaf to cease and desist from unfair labor practices and take certain affirmative actions to follow lawful labor practices. So it's pretty much a slap on the wrist for Curaleaf, which is to be expected, but at the same time, you're helping create a brand new industry. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to, move elbows or knock elbows with other people. I forgot what that expression was. You're going to knock elbows, but at the same time, this is part of learning, and as you learn, you will make mistakes, and then hopefully you don't end up repeating them. That's the whole idea of actually learning from them in the first place. While the parent co. uses Apple's platform to offer cannabis purchases and delivery, as this California MSO seems to be the first to take advantage of Apple opening its App Store to cannabis businesses. So they're launching an app through its Caliva subsidiary that will allow cannabis consumers to place, pick up, or deliver orders, pay electronically, and chat online. California consumers 21 and older can also use the Caliva app to track orders and consult with company consultants. This is a major milestone for both the legal cannabis industry and consumers alike, Dennis O'Malley, chief operating officer of the parent company, said in a statement. Now, personally, I'll never download another app just to order cannabis when I can just go do it from the store. I like to get outside, I like to use my legs and get the fresh air, but regardless, this is going to be an interesting proof of concept to see if this does work for others. On to some press news and media coverage. The future of cannabis is female, as Gen Z women are the fastest growing consumers of legal cannabis, and the new trend for cannabis products is clear labels, lab-tested ingredients, standardized dosing, and modern branding that takes its design cues from traditional consumer brands, which is the best way to sell products typically in the past. So yes, why not make it look attractive so that people want to buy it? But I'm just going to highlight this section because we've covered this in the past, that Gen Z women seem to be the fastest growing segment, but year-over-year sales for Gen Z women, defined as those born in 1997 or later, grew the fastest in 2020 compared to any other cohort at 151%, according to data from Headset, a cannabis analytics firm that collects aggregate information from point-of-sale registers. Gen Z men are followed at 118%, then millennials and Gen Z round out the top four with about 50% and 30% sales growth respectively. The future of cannabis is female, said Bethany Gomez, managing director at Brightfield Group, a cannabis market research agency, an order of magnitude more. And it's just kind of funny because if you know the difference between the two plants, the cannabis plant that has psychoactive properties that gets you stoned and is used for medicinal purposes is the female one. The non-psychoactive one used for hemp and CBD is the male one. So clearly the female plant is attracting the female consumers. But if we look here, we can see that Gen Z females lead the pack, Gen Z males, then millennial females, then millennial males, then Gen X females, then Gen X males, then lastly we've got the boomers at the bottom. On top of that though, you can now board a plane in New York with up to 3 ounces of cannabis. So now, don't think you can board with a kilo in your backpack cartel style, it's not quite like that, but the Albany Times Union reports that police are no longer seizing cannabis, making arrests, or issuing tickets for low-level possession in New York airports. You can board a plane in New York with weed. Crazy. Times are really changing. Low-level possession means anything 3 ounces or less the legal limit. Authorities are instead going to shift their focus to guns, knives, and explosives, naturally. The TSA is still required to notify the police if they find your stash, but the Albany County Sheriff says they will take no action if it's less than 3 ounces. So for all of you haters out there, they're like, oh, this is never happening. It is happening. Open your eyeballs. And on to some very valuable tweets I found from other cannabis investors that I wanted to show you because these are very important questions worth asking yourselves right now, especially during the time that we find ourselves in when many people are going to be thinking about which companies are going to make them the most money in the short term, or, oh my god, prices are red, I should really sell right now. Well, think again. And this one comes from MJ Stock Trader. Why pay a premium for tier 1 MSOs as opposed to, going with higher risk tier 2 or tier 3? Leadership, well-capitalized, first-mover advantage, and consistency. And this is exactly why my largest holdings, regardless, are Cresco Labs and Trulieve, because I believe in the leadership. The more I see Tier 3 cannabis companies swapping out CEOs and missing earnings deadlines, the more I appreciate people like Boris Jordan, chairman for Curaleaf, Kim Rivers, CEO of Trulieve, Ben Kovler, CEO of Green Thumb Industries, or Charles Bachtel, CEO of Cresco Labs, which is 100% true. What builds good companies is real leadership. And so by investing in these leaders, that's what you're going to be getting in the long term. While Sabatino brings this up, I understand 280E is a bitch. I understand weed is still federally illegal. I understand we're still on chipboards because of this. I understand all of this, and this is what I'm trying to relate to all of you. But I buy MSOs now at dirt cheap valuations because I understand these conditions will change. I mean, is the market supposed to look forward or not? And it's important to understand as an investor, even if you don't have a lot of experience, markets don't look backwards. They only look forward. It's the same reason why I have cash now and I'm holding out to buy now at these dirt cheap valuations, because I understand that these conditions will change, and that's what these episodes are to show you. All of this change is happening on the ground, which is why in time the change to the stock prices will come eventually. And then we've got this other one from MJ Stock Trader. I'm a numbers guy, so I decided to compare the big 5 MSOs against Fiverr, which is a tech company that allows people to outsource their jobs to people in other countries for cheaper wages. Now, regardless, it's hard to compare cannabis to a tech software, but because it's considered a high growth stock, that's why they made the comparison. So just wanted to make that distinction. But regardless, the last row is telling I factored the stock gains if they catch up to Fiverr's 2021 price to sales ratio. And so I keep saying that these companies, these US MSOs, are trading at a very attractive price to sales compared to other CPG companies. Now, Fiverr's not a CPG company, but regardless, if we were to look at these MSOs and give them the price to sales ratios that other fast growth companies are getting, take a look at this. Curaleaf would grow by 326%, so your money's gonna 3x. If we were to value Curaleaf with Fiverr's same price to sales ratios, Green Thumb would increase by 263% or grow by 2x and then 63%. Trulieve would grow by 663%, so 6 times plus 63%. Cresco would then grow 7 times, 705%, while Verano would get 728%. If, again, we were to give all of these companies the same or similar price to sales ratio that a high-tech, fast-growth company could get. And I actually found this morning that he did another one with company called Celsius, a fitness beverage company trading at 21x 2021 estimated sales. So the last row shows you the gain from here for each MSO at 21x 2021 sales compared to a fitness beverage company. Curaleaf would grow by 219%, that's 2x from current prices. Green Thumb, 171%, that's 1.7x from current prices. Trulieve, 301%, that's 3x from current prices. Cresco, 334%, that's 3.3x from current prices. And Verano, 317%, 3.1x from current prices. And this is, again, just looking at price to sales, where these are very low for MSOs, comparing it to price to sales of a fitness beverage company. So this was an amazing tweet by MJ Stock Trader. Thank you for putting this together. Love numbers people out there that can do this and pick up where I can't necessarily. And then lastly, this was a great episode of Cannabinoid Connect, a podcast hosted by Kevin Carrillo, and he brought on Brady Cobb of Bluma Wellness in One Plant, Florida. Now, Brady is a trained lawyer from Florida that has a lot of experience in the transition to creating the medical state in Florida. And basically, he is just, as a lawyer, he's an insider in Washington too, and often has to go there on his own dime to get this progress moving. And this was just a very, very informative episode. They talk a lot about SAFE at a certain point around the 24-minute mark. But if you are a cannabis investor, you will benefit from listening to this because it will just, again, make you more confident that SAFE has the votes and that is what's going to pass in the later half of this year, because something has to get done to pave the way for what can get done in 2022. He relays a lot of reasons as to why you should believe that is the case, and other great details that are in this video. Or in this podcast. So I'd recommend listening. And that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of this episode. And what do you think about all the stories I covered? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns. Otherwise, it was nice to see a green day yesterday after all this read, but regardless, the more that you educate yourself on how the industry is evolving and what's actually happening on the ground, the better you will feel about being invested in this very undervalued industry. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.